The last thing I want to talk about today is another 4-issue comic called God of War Fallen God or God of War Volume 2. It's a follow-up to the previous one, but not a sequel. It actually takes place between God of War 3 and Volume 1 and is set in the Egyptian mythology. Yes, really. It explains how Kratos traveled from the Greek mythology to the Norse one, trying to escape his past, something he still struggled with even in Volume 1 and, now that I'm playing the game, a bit less but also there. Seeing this in-between phase is really interesting to me and fleshes out his character even more. Especially the first issue is extremely well written and really made me want more in different settings. We have seen Kratos all over the Greek mythology, and there was lots of variation and his story was basically finished. Nobody ever really asked him to explore environments like the snowy Norse regions or the deserts of Egypt. But now that I actually got to see these things, it feels very refreshing and interesting. I mean, looking at this, can you really deny that there is some sort of weird appeal to see Kratos like this? It just feels so different. And the action also doesn't come too short and, without spoiling too much, reminded me of God of War 3. As I already mentioned, this one is also very short, and in contrary to Volume 1, this is all we have from this scenario. Kratos went on to have more stories set in the Norse mythology, but this is the only time we have ever seen him in Egypt. But is that a bad thing? Not really. The setting in this comic isn't actually meaningful at all. Kratos just happens to be there. This is more of a very personal story about him trying to escape his past. A true bridging chapter between old and new and nothing more than that. Yes, it is interesting to see him climb the deserty mountains or fight off a giant crocodile, but that's not the focus of this comic. And in that way, I find 4 issues to be a good length. If they ever decide to expand on this, I'm here for it. But as it stands now, I would definitely recommend this book to fans who want to see a deeper look into the character of Kratos, even though I have to say that I did like it a tiny bit less than Volume 1. But looking at online reviews, I seem to be pretty alone in that. People seem to hate it because it's pointless and doesn't really go anywhere. Well, I agree. It wasn't necessary and doesn't really add anything aside from fleshing out his character. But that is exactly what I liked so much about this one. It gives Kratos more depth as a character. So my opinion stays. I really like God of War Fallen God. Seeing how it came out in 2021, 3 years after Volume 1, and is considered to be Volume 2, maybe we'll get to see more in the future. More of this, or more of other mythologies. Maybe Kratos is a wise elderly man trying to find a place to settle down for good. Maybe we'll get something we don't typically see in games, like some African or Native American mythologies. Or what about something completely different, like a more horror-focused approach with Haitian voodoo? Or maybe something Caribbean? Caribbean mythologies are extremely interesting and we see next to nothing of those in games and movies. Or maybe a story about his grown-up son in one of these settings as yet another reboot. With 2 of the most recognizable mythologies done, I feel like the God of War brand might be strong enough to pull something like this off, especially seeing the sales numbers of the latest 2 games. They could do something like that and still be successful, I am sure of that, just like the MCU managed to turn the obscure Guardians of the Galaxy into something mainstream. But maybe they won't do that. Maybe this is just wishful thinking and they will pick Egypt next, seeing how they already kind of introduced that setting. A safe and obvious choice. I hope not.